Hey everybody, this is Hilary Stupa. I'm a developer with Qdabra software, and thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to talk about moving solutions off of SharePoint. While you'll find a lot of this content is probably more geared towards those of you who are running SharePoint on-prem, especially those of you who might have an old SharePoint server that's no longer supported, and your old SharePoint server is probably running on an operating system that's no longer supported. And these are the kinds of things that I think keep a lot of us up at night, you know, these concerns about getting our mission critical forms and processes moved to newer servers so we don't have to worry about this out-of-date software. So we're going to be directly addressing those of you who are in this situation, but some of the tools we're talking about are also helpful for those of you who are on SharePoint Online. You still may find that some of these tools could be useful to you for improving some of your processes, or if you're on SharePoint Online, you may still have some SharePoint Designer 2013 workflows that are, again, keeping you up nights. You're thinking about what's going to happen when these are deprecated. How do I move forward? So some of the tools we'll talk about may be useful to you. And of course, as with all of our tools, you're dealing with a support team that you know and you've worked with before, instead of kind of just feeling like you're hollering into a box somewhere when you put in a support request. You know the people that you're working with are going to be there for you when things do require assistance. These are a few dates that may or may not be of importance to you. I think that some of this deprecation information gets a little conflated sometimes. I think there's been different information out there over the years. So I've included, when you look at this slide deck, you'll see down in the notes that I've included links to where these dates came from, just in case you have someone on your team that you need to direct to source materials. If you're still running SharePoint Server 2010, it's been out of support for quite a while now. SharePoint Server 2013 has been out of support for over a year. But as you can see, 2016 and 2019, those are coming right up. I know it feels like 2026 is a long time away, but if there's one thing we've learned over the years, these years fly by fast. These deprecations sneak up, don't they? The final info path form services retirement for SharePoint Online, that's coming up soon. July 2026, and SharePoint 2013 workflows on SharePoint Online, those are in the process of being retired. This April 2nd, 2024 date, I've spoken with a few people who this confused or concerned them. They were thinking this meant that their SharePoint 2013 workflows were going to stop working on this date, but it's simply that those are turned off in new tenants. So if you still are using SharePoint 2013 workflows in SharePoint Online, stay aware of that April 2nd date. Make sure you get these inventoried and migrated to a different solution. So I had a quick couple of polls, and I'm just going to launch those real quick before we move forward. Just asking if you currently are using FormsViewer, and we'll just see, give you a minute here to respond and see how things look. We're at 71%. Give it another couple seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and just close this poll. So it looks like about a third of you or so are currently using FormsViewer. And I'm going to hit close on this. And then my next question was, are you currently using DBXL, which is our web service suite for interacting with having your form interact with a SQL database. It's very helpful for especially larger data stores. As we all know, there's a lot of challenges with using SharePoint lists for larger quantities of data. So I'm going to give this just one more second, and I'll go ahead and close that out. Thanks so much. So it looks like we've got a mix here, and some folks are not using either of these products yet. So hopefully this little intro of how you might incorporate these will be useful to you. In general, if the goal is to move your assets off of SharePoint entirely and to use Qdabra Forms Standalone, which is our non-SharePoint integrated version of FormsViewer, with DBXL, which is our web service suite that allows you to send data back and forth from SQL. It has other features and facets that we'll look at, but those are kind of the high level. So you need to be aware of what are you using? What's on SharePoint that you're using? And I refer to this as supplementary data. What I'm thinking of is things like other lists or libraries that a given form might interact with, like the stuff you're using for your dropdowns and so forth. You want to have a good sense of what that data is and where it lives. Because if you're going to do away with your ancient SharePoint server, that data needs to move someplace where your form can still access it, like, for example, SQL. The forms themselves need to be able to submit to and query from DBXL. We have tools to help with that. Specifically, we've got an XTP, which is a template part for anyone who's not familiar that you can easily add to your form and configure. We have a key service that you can use for ensuring that your forms are communicating securely between FormsViewer and DBXL. SharePoint workflows, any approval workflows can be replaced easily with our Central Flows product, and you can also replace individual little notifications with the DBXL rendering service. Taking a little closer look at some of these considerations, in terms of supplementary data, like we all have different types of supplementary data. And I think all of you are going to be familiar when I say that some of it's pretty static. For example, you might have created a SharePoint list for statuses that you use in one of your forms, and those have not changed since you created the form. There's always been new, submitted, approved, rejected, completed, for example. So that sort of pretty static data is very easy to set up in SQL. You just set up a table for it and you manually enter the data. If your data doesn't change, if it's something that's pretty static, that's fine. If it's data that's really alive, that changes a lot, that you need to be able to add new entries to, it may be data where you'll need some supplementary forms in order to keep that data flowing to and from SQL so that you can make sure you have that data up to date easily. QueryDB is the DBXL web service that you can use to return data from SQL to your form. We have a tool to help you build those queries. It uses XML. It is very easy to use form data for your queries. So if you have been in a situation where you're querying a list of 5,000 items or whatever and bringing them all back to your form and then filtering your dropdown to only show the relevant ones. Instead, you can use DBXL QueryDB and just query for the data you need. This really improves form performance. We have migration tools to make it easy to import existing XML into DBXL. And then our tools also offer you the easy convenience of mapping data from your XML into SQL. Now it's available to you for reporting and all of those other things that we'd like to be able to do, which is kind of challenging when we've got repeating elements inside of our XML. So just things to consider and think about as you contemplate making this kind of a move. The DBXL XTP, which I mentioned, that's a template part that can be added in the Qdabra Forms Designer. Forms Designer is part of FormsViewer, Qdabra Forms. It's all kind of included there. It allows you to quickly make your form DBXL friendly. You just add some rule logic. It adds built-in submit functionality. It makes it easy for you to open existing documents from DBXL. You can easily repoint data connections. If you are already using DBXL, but you need to switch over to the user key methods so that you can communicate securely and simply with FormsViewer, this XTP will also help you with that. I mentioned the document deployer tool to make it easy to import your existing XML. So right now your form submits to a SharePoint library. With this change, it would submit to DBXL. All of your existing forms are in your SharePoint library, as part of this change, you'll want to get them into DBXL. So that's kind of what the migration tool can help with. I've also used it recently in a migration project for creating XML for my supplementary forms, my supplementary data. I just used export to Excel from a SharePoint list to create an Excel spreadsheet. And then we also have a tool to make it easy to create XML from an Excel file. So simple, lots of different things to consider, lots of actual things to do. But on the whole, we have a bunch of tools for you to help with these things. The tool that we have that I think could be useful to SharePoint Online, if you are still using SharePoint Designer workflows, or if you're using Power Automate flows for notifications and you're finding those to be not quite what you want, is the DBXL rendering service. With Power Automate flows, I think probably if you've used them at all, you've noticed the polling lag. And some organizations are okay with that it can take up to 5 minutes for an email to send. And some folks who are very email centric and we work from our inboxes and we need things to happen quickly, DBXL rendering sends emails very quickly and you don't have that polling lag where you're waiting on things. The other thing that's really helpful with DBXL rendering is you can use a form view to design your email. So if you've ever had to do any complicated HTML and Power Automate in the teeny tiny expression builder window, this might be something you would appreciate. You can also easily include form views as PDFs. And there's a tool to help you in DBXL to help you create these email mappings where you can also use XPath conditions to determine, should I send the email? You can use form data for those as well as for email properties like subject and to and so forth. So it gives you a full set of tools for handling your notifications. Whoops, I went too far. Back I go. Sorry. Jumpy trigger finger. And we also have the Central Flows tool, which I mentioned. If you're using SharePoint 2013 workflows and you just need a quick and easy way to replace any of those approval workflows, Central Flows could probably be a good tool for you. When you get the slide deck, I've included a link to a recent webinar on that, so you can go and take a look at that and see if this looks like a good solution for you. Central Flows includes out of box a dashboard, so you can go to one place and see all of your forms, unlike your current SharePoint libraries where, Joan in accounting has to be able to go find the human resources site and all of these things. It really simplifies things for you. It's quick and easy to add the XTP again to a form. You can add an approval process to any form really quickly. It gives your users a consistent task pane, so your user experience is smooth. They know what to look for, and I think we all know how beneficial that is to give our users that opportunity. So that's kind of the set of tools we have available for you to help you just say goodbye to your ancient SharePoint server. And as a special guest, we have today Brittany Cherry. She's a system network administrator with Peterson LLP. And we just recently finished one of these migration projects for Peterson, getting them off of their old SharePoint server and moving them to FormsViewer. And they have just gone through the US tax season using their new forms. So we've invited Brittany here to talk to us a little bit about how that changeover has gone for her. How are you, Brittany?
I am well. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for doing this. So how has this switch gone for you now that you've had a full tax season with your new system?
So I will say when we moved over, we had about 20 or more forms that we had to move over from InfoPath and SharePoint and into FormsViewer. Our users have used it quite a lot the last few months. We use our forms, they're customizable, and we use our forms to do our processes of our tax flows, our PTO billings, our billing forms, and many other forms. overall, it was uh, extremely successful. Our users love the new dashboard where it is basically a one-stop shop with the drop down of all the forms. Previously, with our SharePoint environment, you got to go into one page to another to get this form and that form. So the central location definitely was a huge plus for us. We were able to keep all of our customizations, and the look and the flow of the forms was, although it moved more smoothly, it was more streamlined, and the changes of the forms themselves were able to roll into FormsViewer. So there wasn't much of a learning curve for them, which is a big, big, big important part of it. But I will say overall, it was extremely successful with no complaints at all.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I recall that as we were migrating your templates, we had very few changes that we had to make to the templates themselves so that the user interfaces stayed the same. And then you guys had a number of really specific checklists, and we built you a generic checklist solution for those so you could just kind of create new ones on the fly without always having to create a new form template.
Right. So we use checklists for every type of return that is processed out of our firm. They are very customizable. Like we receive them, we have to remit them as they are and have them available to everybody. So once we entered in, it was very easy to enter in the forms. You're talking 20-page forms. We were able to enter them in as checklists, and they have flowed as well as good as we can expect. And it was successful. And the next year going forward, I don't have to go in and add the 20-page forms because we did it this year. So it would just be like a quick update and publish.
Yeah, if you have any changes you need to make to those checklists, you can just change the generic checklist for that specific type, and then they're ready to go for the next year. That's fantastic. Yeah, it had been quiet, so I tend to think that quiet equals good. I hadn't heard from you saying help, help. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
they went through tax season with everything going smoothly. Yeah,
it
and
was
this
a
is
success.
yeah, and this gets you guys at least several steps further away from your old SharePoint server. So I think that's wonderful.
Correct, which was our obviously one of the main reasonings for doing this.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Brittany. I really appreciate you coming and talking to us about this, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So that's really, kind of the whole scoop here. I've got some points here in the slide deck for different reasons why you might want to use DBXL. Definitely if you're struggling with reporting, if you're struggling with efficient form queries, or if you are sick and tired of waiting for flows from Power Automate to send your emails, you should take a look at DBXL. This pricing is also available up on the web. Qdabra Forms, this is our Forms Viewer and Forms Designer product. Right now we're still available in the SharePoint store. There's some changes coming to the SharePoint store soon that we're making changes for. We did a webinar on that earlier this month if you'd like to go look for that. But as Brittany and I were just discussing, they were able to keep their forms pretty much as is after this migration, which made things easier for their users. And having happy users is always a good thing. We like that. We do have another webinar on the schedule for sure on May 9th, so keep an eye in your inbox for that. I'm thinking there may be others added or scheduled in between now and then, but I know for sure we've got one on May 9th about using some new offline functionality for Forms viewers. So if that sounds like something that might be useful to you, please keep an eye out or register for that. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. As always, if you think of a question later, you know where to reach me, hillary.stupa@qdabra.com, or you can email support@qdabra.com, because I know, for me at least, sometimes questions don't show up in my head until well after the time has come and gone to ask them. Thank you all so much for attending today. Brittany, thank you again. And I hope everybody just has a wonderful day. I see a question from Rick about a free trial. Yes, we do have a trial version of DBXL, which you can get from our website. I can get you a link for that as well. Rick, I'll have your email address from the webinar registration, so I'll send you some information on free trials there. And FormsViewer on-prem, I don't believe there's a free trial of that, but you can try out FormsViewer from SharePoint Online for free. But I'll be sure to get you some information on that, Rick. Thank you for asking
Yeah,
that.
you can certainly install FormsViewer on-prem and try it out before you buy, and we're happy to help you set that up as well.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you. I appreciate that information. So, Rick, I'll get you some information on how to get some of these trials so we can help you get those set up and you can give them a shot. And I guess that will be that. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate you all for coming. Appreciate you, Brittany. And I hope everybody has a wonderful spring day.